Hi, everybody. This is Saad for the Sad Truth. Several weeks ago, I had the distinct pleasure of chatting on my show with Professor Michel Pham, who's an old friend of mine and a highly respected professor of marketing and a consumer psychologist. And toward the end of our chat, I had asked him what are some things that he loves about being a professor and what might be some things that he doesn't appreciate in being an academic. And his response to the latter was actually quite telling. He basically uh, described the frustration that he feels whenever someone who hears that he's a professor basically asks, "Oh, so what do you do with all of your time? Given that okay, you teach a couple of hours a week, what else do you do?" And this is something that I've seen others exhibiting this kind of uh, breathtaking ignorance. Now, most people understand what it takes to be a professor and how unbelievably stressful of a job it is. But for many people who don't really have a good sense of what happens in academia, they truly do believe that a professor is somebody who, instead of teaching elementary school kids or high school kids, is simply somebody who teaches adults, and that's about it. So the rest of the time we basically pack our bags and just go surfing or watch reruns of Three's Company. Well, of course, that's hardly what most professors do. Now, of course, professors vary greatly in terms of how committed they are to their profession, how ambitious they are, how hardworking they are. Some professors are very accomplished and active researchers, others are not. And so, of course, how much time one puts into their profession will vary, as it will be the case in any profession. But let me sort of break down for you what are all of the things that a professor tackles. And of course, different people will pursue each of those responsibilities to different extents. And so, usually, when you submit a dossier for a evaluative exercise as a professor, your dossier could be broken up into three broad sections: research, teaching, and service. And so, basically, what you're trying to do when you submit such a report is to try to demonstrate, how you've contributed, how you've performed on each of these three grand umbrellas, if you like. Now, let's drill down each of these so that we can get a sense of what a professor does uh, that occupies his or her day. So, in terms of research, we could talk about the books that professors write, right? I mean, for anybody who's ever written a book, you know that books don't magically write themselves. And so professors write books. Professors also publish journal articles in peer reviewed journals. Now, to give you a sense of how that process works, uh, as an academic who is specializing in a particular field, you have to stay abreast of the relevant literature. So you spend a lot of time reading the literature so that you are up to date on what is happening in your various areas of interest and expertise. Now, let's suppose that you decide that you'd like to work on a particular research topic. Well, the actual mechanics of executing the research is a very long, laborious, and time costly endeavor. So, you have to first write a report to get uh, ethical clearance from your institutional review board. That takes a while. Once you get that clearance, you then have to, develop the data collection procedures. If you're conducting an experiment, you have to develop the experimental stimuli. If you're conducting a field experiment, you have to set up the appropriate uh, data collection protocols. Whatever that process is, it's typically a long and arduous process. You have to collect the data, you have to analyze the data, you then have to write the paper. Now, if you've spent a year, 2, 3 years working on your research paper, uh, the clock hasn't started yet in terms of you actually trying to get it published. Because then at one point, your paper is written and you decide to submit it to a certain journal. Now the peer review process begins. You send it to a journal, the journal looks at it, it's reviewed by a few reviewers, and then they come back to you. Either they reject your paper, in which case you just spent several years working on a paper which now has gotten rejected and you have to start with some other journal. Or if you are fortunate enough to pass the first obstacle, you then move on to the next round with that journal, where you probably have to spend several months, if not more, revising the paper in line with what the editor and the reviewers have asked you to do. And then you go back and forth through that process. In many of the top journals, you might do 2, 3, 4 rounds. So just from the point from when you started to first submit your paper, never mind that you had already put several years of work into that project, from the moment that you submit your paper to it being finally accepted for publication, might itself be a few years. And of course, you're working on many such projects if you are uh, a researcher who performs a lot, who does a lot of, an active researcher. So you write journal papers, you write books, you of course write book chapters in edited anthologies. You also can write conference papers. So these are papers that are published in conference proceedings. You're invited to give talks at various universities, various venues. You give talks at academic conferences. Of course, in many cases, if you don't have internal money to do your research, you have to apply for grants with external funding agencies. In the US, you have the National Science Foundation. In Canada, you have other governmental agencies that support research. That process takes a very, very long time. You could apply for internal as well as external grants. Then, of course, you have to write progress reports. So, for example, I have a chaired professorship, and that chaired professorship, every year I have to write a report explaining, what I've done in the last year that would, make the folks who are managing that purse happy with my productivity. So all that I've just listed to you are different facets of your research career. So we haven't yet touched upon, the idea that professors do nothing other than sit in a classroom and lecture. Okay, so after you're done with the 15 hours a day that you put into your research career, if you're a active researcher, let's move on now to teaching. So of course, a professor lectures in the classroom, but of course the fact that I lecture, say, twice a week, 3 hours each, that's 6 hours of class time, or something around 6 hours. Of course, there's prep time. So if you're teaching a new course, you've got to prepare this course. So this semester I'm teaching for the first time ever a new course titled Understanding Our Consuming Instinct. Well, I've never taught that course in that particular form. I've taught the material intertwined in various courses, but the fact that I'm teaching a new course requires me to prepare new material. And so you might imagine these are just rules of thumb, but something in the order of 3 to 5 hours of preparation for each hour of airtime in the classroom. Now that doesn't just magically happen. You have to spend that time to prepare your coursework. You've got office hours. That's outside of class time. In my case, in all my classes, there's a very, very all-encompassing project that the students have to do, which really does require a lot of supervision on my part. And so I end up spending countless hours a week meeting with students. Of course, in today's technological reality, students send you endless emails, as I'm currently facing. I'm literally deluged with endless emails because they want immediate access to you. Now, if you are conscientious and you want to cater to every student's request, well, you'll spend several hours a week, if not more, just answering student emails. If you are a serious and active researcher, you also supervise MSc, Masters of Science theses. You supervise doctoral students in terms of their doctoral dissertations. That takes a extraordinary amount of time and effort on the part of a supervisor. You also supervise postdocs, guys who've already gotten their PhDs and are now working with you as a postdoc. If you have a large group of students that you're supervising, you will have lab meetings. This is outside of your lecturing. This is where you're just meeting with your own students, your own lab, every week or every couple of weeks to decide on the course of action, how's everybody's progress going, and so on and so forth. So now I've given you a bit of a sense of what we do in terms of teaching. So now let's move on to the third component. So we've done research, we've done teaching, now we move on to service. Well, uh, service could be sitting on administrative committees, either at the departmental level, at the faculty level, or at the university level. Some of these committees are, you know, astonishingly time consuming. So, for example, I sit on the MSc PhD committee, which is basically the committee that reviews the dossiers of any applicants who are applying to our MSc and PhD programs. Well, if we get many applicants, I have to sit there hours on end going over all of those dossiers. This doesn't happen while I'm surfing. I have to dedicate many hours a week when that process is happening to evaluate those dossiers. So administrative workload is one part of service. Consulting, right, or reaching out to industry would be another element of your service responsibilities. Now, of course, some fields are more amenable to that particular pursuit than others, right? I mean, if you're a classics professor, you probably don't have industry outreach the way you might if you're an engineering professor or a law professor or a business school professor. There's public outreach that involves media appearances, and of course, this is something that I'm very involved in. So I do, I don't know how many hours per year of media appearances that ultimately, I don't have to do, but I do because I believe that it is part of a professor's responsibility to make their work hopefully accessible to the masses, to weigh in on important issues. That is part of sort of our grand responsibility as public intellectuals. I work very hard at developing and maintaining a large public platform as per on social media. So many of you will attest to the fact that I spend quite a bit of effort not only contributing content to social media, but also to engaging with the people who follow me. That takes a tremendous amount of effort. Oftentimes it's very fruitful, other times it's quite irritating. I created a YouTube channel that takes me endless hours to maintain and to generate the content that I do for that YouTube channel. I don't make much money off that. I do it because I consider it to be an important contribution to the dissemination of ideas, as I am doing in this exact clip right now. One can write articles in popular mass outlets. For example, I'm a columnist for Psychology Today. I've written close to 300 articles for Psychology Today. Last year I started writing for Huffington Post. I just wrote an article that's forthcoming with Wired. So all of these contributions, in a sense, are service because you're trying to reach out to the public. It's not really part of your scientific publications in scientific journals, but yet it does require a tremendous amount of effort to write these articles for the masses. Of course, you could also serve as an ad hoc reviewer for a wide range of journals, right? So earlier I was talking about the peer review process. So sometimes a journal will write to you and say, hey, this seems to be in your area of expertise. Do you mind reviewing this paper for us? So in this case, you're not sitting on the editorial board of that journal. You're an ad hoc reviewer, but it'll probably take you, 4 to 8 hours to read the paper and then write a reasonable review of your position or your opinion of that paper. So anytime that you receive such a review request, you basically can count on your day, at least one day, being committed to that task. Now, of course, you can also sit, as I do, as many other seasoned researchers do, on editorial boards. So when you sit on an editorial board, that means that you will receive a certain number of papers to review for that particular journal. So if I sit on the editorial board of Journal of Consumer Psychology and Journal of Marketing Research, so I can bet that I can receive 4, 6, 8, 10 papers a year from each of these journals to review papers for the journal. And again, keeping in mind that each of those reviews takes somewhere between 4 to 8 hours at the very least, you can then tabulate how many hours that takes. If that's not sufficient work, you could also, if you become truly a senior and highly respected researcher in your field, you can take on a position of an associate editor of a journal. So I used to be an associate editor for the journal Evolutionary Psychology, or you could become editor-in-chief of a journal, which of course is incredibly time-consuming and laborious. So think about all of the things that I just mentioned, all of the different facets of your research career, your teaching career, and your service career. And then think about how Professor Pham was exactly right, how insulting it is, how galling it is for people to think that, all we do is, walk in with a pretty bow tie to a classroom for 3 hours a week, pontificate about something, and then the rest of the time, we're eating caviar and surfing. It's not quite that. Now, most of us who are very hardworking academics also do it because we love it, right? I've been on record saying in many public forums that I love what I do. Even if I work all the time, I do it with pleasure in most cases because that's what I love to do. But to think that all we do is walk around lecturing once in a while and the rest of the time, we're at the gym lifting weights is an insult to what professors do. Now, I'll end it on a positive note. Just in the last few days, I received a couple of messages posted on my public Facebook page from two separate individuals who seem to not succumb to this galling, misconception. So I'll read to you their two comments, not to brag, but because I think that these two gentlemen really do get, at least in my case, how much effort I put into my career. So here's quote one. Just stop to realize something. You work as a busy faculty member of a university, conduct research, and meet with students, etc. Yet on top of that, you meet for several minutes with a cornucopia of different people to talk about and record conversations of varying topics. He wrote varied topics, to then sit and edit to publish. On top of all that, you reach out constantly to your audiences on Twitter and Facebook. Dude, seriously, thank you for your generosity and kindness. Now, that's the kind of gratitude that I can get behind. And here's the second quote posted earlier today from another gentleman. So, start of the quote, pretty sure Gad has found a way to manipulate time. Otherwise, how can you make the effort to be so active in the public sphere, both on your own channel and others, and be a professor at a university, ? Thank you for all your hard work, Gad. Looking forward to seeing you on Rogan again. Smiley face. So these are gentlemen that I truly thank them from the bottom of my heart because, as I said, they're not succumbing to the misconception that has so frustrated Professor Pham. So to conclude, professors, at least serious professors, spend most of their waking hours working very hard. So there you go, folks. I hope that I've demystified for you the daily life of a professor. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Ciao.